So, I guess we are live, at least it's saying so. Um, and I will just start this video because I think I will keep it on my channel for people to watch later. So, um, when you join this live chat later, you may have to go back afterwards in the beginning to listen to the introduction, because in this video I want to give an overview of the idea of the integral theory, which is mainly popularized by Ken Wilber and by Claire Graves in his model of the psychosocial development of us humans. And this research for this model really goes back a long while. It goes back thousands of years to a point where basically we humans split up from other apes and became humans. And when spiral dynamics and also the integral theory is analyzing how we humans develop throughout evolution and throughout our own individual lives as human beings, they have found great similarities. And so it's true for us individuals that we go through these stages of development from a point of knowing nothing as an infant to a point of ever greater wisdom and knowledge as we grow to adulthood. So this is the same thing we have seen throughout evolution. And the integral model starts out with the question, where did we come from an understanding point of view? So if you're just joining, please just ask your questions, and I will come back to them after I gave a short introduction to the integral model, integral spirituality. So and this is also known in Christianity, for example, as a myth, when we first became aware of ourselves, when we split up from being not aware of our selfhood and became aware that we are some entity within a larger theme of reality, that is when Christianity calls it the fall from grace, where we are, have done something in our mind that is not really true anymore, and we are splitting up from reality, so to speak. And this happened a very long time ago in our evolutionary history. We have then become very instinctive in our behavior. We were feeling that we are some kind of entity against the world out there. And the only way to navigate this world was by our instincts. So there was no knowledge of anything that was going on. There was just instinctive, reactive behavior. So this is very early stages of development. And then the next step is to have some kind of idea of what is actually going on out there, and it's the mythical state where we are trying to give some kind of explanation for what is going on. And usually that's when we are developing models of God, of entities, of something we have to pray to for it to rain, and we want to have some kind of entity behind the things that we can pray to. And this is really the magic state of development, where we believe in all sorts of things without any explanatory model behind it. And we go through that as well in our personal development. So there's a stage of development in our very recent history, personal history, when we were very young, that our brain went through these same processes of understanding the world, but also on a larger scheme of evolutionary development. And so from this magic state, we come back and it somehow swings back to this notion of being an ego. And we become more egocentric. We become more aware that we are some kind of entity that has control in the next stage, where it's me against the world. It's very hostile. It's all fighting, and it's all about making it in this world, like on a very basic level. It doesn't have much to do with any understanding per se, but it has more to do with just fighting for survival. And our sense of community is very, very limited. It's usually our family or our very close tribe. And in this, from this state of development, we further grow our awareness and consciousness. And this is the overall overarching theme of what happens to us humans as we develop through these stages. And that is, we encounter problems in whatever we perceive that are not that we are not able to solve with our current understanding. And so we have to grow our understanding in order to be able to encompass and solve the issues lying ahead of us. And this always means we have to transcend our current belief system, our current understanding. And this happened in evolution with this state of being very egocentric, that we encountered larger dynamics within society that didn't respond well to egoic behavior. And so we had to develop some mechanism to cope with larger societal interaction and larger and ever-growing tribes and cities and so forth. And from that also developed this whole, or many religions developed out of this stage of developing from the egocentric to the mythic state, where we are having some God-given rules that we have to adhere to, but they all served this purpose of dealing with the problems that we were faced with as humans. And this is more like a couple thousand years ago. And so these religions really had the purpose of providing a teaching for people to make life easier for them in societies, so that people develop from this egocentric state to a mythic state where they believed in some greater goal and believed their lives to be part of some larger reality, of some larger purpose, but all without really reflecting and having a greater understanding of what the immediate experience that people were having, what it really meant. For example, when people were living in their city, they didn't really have any global consciousness. They didn't know really what it meant to live in a city compared to other cities, or if you even call them cities. But back then, really your worldview was very limited on your immediate surroundings, what was going on in your town, and the rules were given by either by your religion, whatever you believed in. And so this idea of having a religion is already larger than just having a very egocentric based lifestyle where you're really only seeing your immediate surroundings and scan them for survival threats or things you want to go after to improve your survival. And from that stage of believing in God or some larger entity that gives some meaning to this whole individual life is to develop further, and that's where many people are today, into the so-called orange stage, where we are driven by some goal that is oftentimes materialistic. We want to achieve something. We have this achievement mindset where our consciousness has grown to a state where we are aware of ourselves integrated in a very large dynamic, today global dynamic, but in more recent history, maybe the dynamic of your country or your city, and you were aware of certain things. And that's also where we had science come in and develop models that were pretty accurate and enabled us to make predictions. And so this achievement ego is really coming out of this development from having been faced with challenges that religion wasn't able to solve. And we developed an even greater sense of the universe. We know we are not the center of the universe anymore, or we don't believe that anymore. We never were, but the Earth and the stars and galaxies, so our understanding of the world has grown a lot in relative terms. And from this stage, again, we had to, and we are seeing this dynamic still at this moment, we are developing further into a mindset, into a framework that is more wholesome, in a sense that we are engaging with other people in a cooperative manner. We see the sameness in everyone. We are able to see that egoic-driven achievement behavior is not the only way to partake in this world, and that there may be something we all share, like we have the same values to a large degree, we have the same wishes and hopes. And so the pendulum kind of swings to this side where we are very aware of our sameness, and we are kind of overly emphasizing that every voice has the same validity, even though there comes new problems with that. But our understanding in this regard grew not so much on a scientific side, but more on the side of social interaction, what it meant to be a human in a larger group. And so this is stage green, where we developed the ability to really feel what other people feel, to become empathetic and really train our consciousness to be more loving, more kind. And so that's really what this stage green brought us. And from there, it gets interesting, because the model of spiral dynamics makes the distinctions between all these stages that we have discussed before. There's a very big difference to the next stage that lies ahead, because the next stages, they are called integral, where people who have developed their consciousness to this state, they usually have had direct experience that there is something connecting all of this, and that these larger dynamics are going on. Whereas the belief systems before were always fighting against each other, kind of. So someone who is very orange oriented, he wants to only partake in the so-called economic drives, and he wants to improve the economy no matter what. And someone who's very deep in stage green, he may be on this model developed further, but he is still seeing all the other stages as kind of bad and lower and not as equal valuable. And in the integral stage, which is called turquoise, or first yellow and then turquoise, but from these stages onwards, you see that this is a whole large dynamic going on. You realize that there is some aspect to all of these stages that makes them very valuable to the overall development of humanity. They are very necessary. It's not that you can develop from that you can skip one of these stages, for example. So all of them are really necessary in order to grow. For example, you wouldn't tell a child in first class and you wouldn't be angry at him when he can't do some calculations and some very difficult stuff that he had never learned. So it's very natural for that child to have to go through all the different stages to understand and to come to an understanding of the very complex mathematics and how they work together. So he has to start out with learning the numbers and so forth. And this is the same with overall human development. All these stages have their validity, and it may be very frustrating for people on these so-called higher stages to view the world and see so many problems and realize the root cause of these problems. That's really where the issue is coming from. It may be very frustrating, but then really when you develop to the yellow and to the turquoise stage, you realize that there's also nothing wrong. Like with all the negative stuff that is going on, it's part of the process, so to speak. There is no way to arrive at a higher understanding without all these problems. And as a society, to develop through these stages, we have to kind of, on an individual basis, go through all these routes that are not successful. We have to try out all these things that are kind of on an evolutionary scale will not be successful in the long run. And so being faced with these challenges and problems is the way that evolution works, to come up with new solutions. And it's a trial and error thing that now, compared to what was going on the biological scale even earlier, is now happening in consciousness. And that's what makes it so difficult and so challenging, because we are experiencing it right directly, whereas we could say biological development went on more in the background and we didn't really have to do it, even though that's also not entirely true. There's also always, when animals develop through and live through their lives, that's all a conscious experience that's happening when they are challenged. That's not just happening outside of consciousness and then we come up with this body with our hands and everything just out of nothing. There was a lot of challenge involved in developing our human body with all its functions and what we were able to do. We had to be challenged in order to develop these capacities. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have developed them. And so the whole integral model, and what makes it so beautiful and very, I think, very accurate, is that it looks back on this whole background of evolution and makes from that predictions into the future and see how have humans developed in the past, what patterns can we see there, and what might lie ahead of us. So that's really where it gets interesting, when you have developed to this second tier understanding of the yellow and turquoise, which is, if we go to the yellow stage, we have a even more whole and complete understanding of ourselves as a entity in this social interaction, in this whole world, because we not only are reacting to our instincts and to our belief systems, but we see them as something objective. And this is really the most interesting aspect maybe of this whole integral model, is that it reveals to us that what the underlying mechanism of this development is really a process of making something that we thought was subjective and turn it into something objective. So the worldview we were basing our understanding on beforehand is being turned into something we can see objectively, and we don't identify so much with it that we are bound to act from that understanding. That really makes it a very, very accurate model. And this is a process that's really going to continue to have something that we are identified with, that we are not really consciously aware of. That's our sense of, yeah, this is what I am, this is what I'm acting from, this is my understanding. And then seeing the underlying mechanisms behind it, turning them into some object we can observe in consciousness, and with that being able to transcend it, because really only that which you have seen as not you, you can consciously resist acting unconsciously because of that. So objective truth is something very different than a subjective truth. If someone is insulting us and says something against the truth that we think is part of us, of who we are, we don't really know that we are just believing this. But this really feels very insulting. We feel hurt by that, and we will defend this subjective truth. Whereas when we have seen something to be a belief and we have separated from that belief and we see it as some mechanism to cope with reality, then really anything anybody can say against that is not going to insult us on a personal level, and we can talk about it and have no issue with other people criticizing it. And so from this stage onwards, my understanding and my personal insight really stops, I would say. The next stage would be turquoise, where you have an integral eye. And I'm not really sure if I have tasted some aspects of this stage myself, but I would say, from my understanding, we come at this stage to an understanding that everything is one and that we are part of this one consciousness. And whenever you have embodied this understanding very deeply, it will influence everything you do and everything that you believe. So that's really my introduction to spiral dynamics and the integral theory. And I've seen there were some questions so far. Let me check them if there was really a question or just some notes. Okay, are you from Germany is the first question by Ionian. Yes, I'm from Germany, that's true. I guess you can hear it from my accent. Integral spirituality is post-secular spirituality. Okay, I can't really comment on that, sorry, Ionian. Johnny is asking, hey, my integral spirituality is almost non-existent. After looking at a little of flat earth theory, can I still recover? Yeah, of course. I mean, if you have looked at flat earth theory as some very fascinating and entertaining idea and have validated its non-validity for yourself, I think you can easily recover. Look into the works of Ken Wilber, especially his book Integral Meditation. Can really recommend. And another great book to start with spiral dynamics on a more social development and social interaction standpoint is the book by Don Beck, uh, which is also just called, now I forgot the name. It's just Spiral Dynamics, the name, yeah. It doesn't have any special name. But it's based on Claire Graves' discoveries about human development. Good that you're not a flat earth believer right now, not yet. Hope you're not becoming one. We were born in a world of lies. Spirituality, it's hard to swallow. Okay, yeah. But commenting on we were born in a world of lies, that's something people see as bad and something that's evil. Of course, it's all, as I mentioned before, part of the process of growing our consciousness. We will always develop that we believe in something that's not accurate. So I don't believe there's really much out there that we were taught in school, for example, that was purposefully taught to us to harm us. It's just whenever it was a lie, it may not have been. It was the best of our knowledge, but it's not accurate. So it's not really evil. So it's more like it's not a lie really. It's just having some misunderstanding revealed. Depending on how you measure it, it takes about 5 years to grow up into a larger cognitive structure and establish a wider perspective. I would say that's an accurate estimation, but what we have to realize is, and what is also why integral theory is so important, is when you know about it, when you have some knowledge about where the journey is going and where the solutions to the problems that lie ahead of you and what they are, then you will develop through these stages usually a lot quicker. Whereas I can see it with older people, with many people that have some job they work for their whole life, and yeah, they may do great things and they may develop a lot of specific knowledge to their job and they may become experts, but really many other areas of their lives they really are stuck. They're stuck at some stage, and you can really see that the problems they have, they repeat themselves and over and over and over. And really, if you're not consciously trying to see that there's a way out by growing yourself personally and also spiritually, then it's really a very hard way and very difficult. And most people, never develop past the point that their society has developed to on a larger scale. So when you're just kind of passively consuming all the media and everything that's kind of social norm around you, you will stay on that level. And going out and discovering higher states of development for yourself is really usually when you're not having anybody around you that is into that same stuff. It's a very lonely path, but also very I forgot the English word. Sorry. It's a very rewarding journey. Personal growth is faster in early life, but takes place in the whole span of life, as does the integration of experience. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, you develop much faster through the early stages as you are naturally growing as a child, and it's kind of like a passive process because society drags you along because there's some definite way you have to develop through school and whatever your parents are teaching you to develop to a certain stage, usually somewhere orange, green, and I don't know, maybe in some families even beyond that, but yeah, you will go through the first stages much quicker than through the later stages. Around what age does someone reach yellow stage? I don't think that's something you can generally say, because our society is not yet at stage yellow. There are estimations that I think around 1% of people or less are currently developing into stage yellow. So it's very rare that you will find an individual who's in a family that is on stage yellow and will naturally grow to that level of understanding and evolution. But in general terms, I would say it comes definitely in later life, when you have developed through all the other stages, which takes, I would guess, like at least 20 or more years. Thanks for the book recommendation from a previous video. The Book of Not Knowing, I really enjoyed. Yeah, that book is really, really good. I enjoy it as well. I'm reading it a second time right now, because there are so many small insights in the book, and it's a very direct way of discovering the truth. And I think a few videos ago I talked about the difference between growing up and waking up. And the Book of Not Knowing is really a direct path to waking up. It's about seeing the truth. And this is something, maybe I can mention it again, it's this process of growing up we are talking here. We are talking here about this integral theory is something that happens kind of separately from waking up. You can wake up on any of these stages and you will feel one with everything that you know right now, which means your current worldview will become one with the subjective. And so there is this emergence of all the objects with the subject. But on the objective side, what you have realized about this reality will be very limited. And so waking up will become even greater, so to speak, and even more wholesome and enjoyable on the higher stages, because what you are becoming one with is greater, is larger, is more inclusive, is more whole, and more compassionate towards all of its parts. Whereas the earlier stages, it can be a very hostile worldview, and you become one with whatever you know and believe about the world. Hello, Lauritz. What's your opinion about our future with upper stage societies? And what are the potential problems even in higher stages like yellow? Good question. Yeah, there will definitely be problems. I think most of them we cannot foresee for this current moment, because they haven't really showed themselves. There hasn't really been a lot of problems we were able to identify that need stage yellow understanding and that need stage yellow approach. So whatever we will face in the future will reveal itself. And I guess one of the, or some problems we see already that we are not able to solve on these lower stages, orange and green, is, for example, climate change, is the over focus on materialistic progression, on making this system ever more refined and ever more to create ever more output, but it won't solve the problem that we are facing. It solves the problem of giving a purpose to our life, and we or what many people do is overly focus on this career achievement, this materialistic achievement to drive a new car every few years. And all of this is really not coming from a deep inner need to have these things, but from a lack of the ability to feel really fulfilled and one with what we are already experiencing. So there is a lot of waking up we have to do, but also on the growing up side, we have to find that as we develop further into stage yellow, these problems will we will only be able to solve with stage yellow understanding. Yeah, that's something I believe about the problems we will face. Okay, there are only 3 people left in the live chat. I'm very very thankful that you have been able to stick it out with me for 35 minutes. If you're not having any further questions, I think we will end this live chat here. Thank you very much for joining, and maybe see you in the next one. We will see how well this was received. So see you. Goodbye.